Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be showing us how I draft and sew this crop shirt. The first thing I'm going to be starting with is drafting the pattern. So this is the measurement I'm going to be working with. For this shirt, I want my shirt bigger than my body measurement, so I'm going to be adding some inches to my body measurement. Even if you want yours fitted, you are still going to add like 1 inch for ease so that you don't have that gaping button thing once you button your shirt. I'll start with drafting my back piece. So I'm applying my shoulder measurement. So my shoulder measurement is 14 divided by 2, that's 7 inches. But I've added 2 inches to that measurement just to get that big shirt feel. But it is not what you're after. Please use your exact measurement. At the shoulder mark, I'm going to drop down by 1 inch. So that's where I'll start measuring my armhole length from. So the next thing I'm going to do is to measure my neckline. So my neckline width for the back is 2.5. I'm measuring 2.5, and then the depth is 1.5. Next, I use my curved ruler to connect the lines to get my neck curve. Next, I'll be working on the armhole curve. So I'm going to mark my armhole line. So it's going to be the round bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. My measurement is 7.75. So I'll just mark that from the 1 inch drop. And then I'll mark it on the other side and then draw a straight line to connect it. Next, I'm going to measure the length of the crop top. So the length of my crop top is 19 inches. So you use your measurement for however long you want it. So I'll just mark that and then mark it across. For my armhole curve, I will measure my shoulder measurement and then take that same measurement to my chest line, and then I'll mark it. Next, I'm going to draw a straight line to connect the shoulder at the 1 inch drop to the chest line. Next, I'm going to use my straight ruler to connect the neck curve to the 1 inch drop. And then I'll apply my round bust measurements. Mind you, I said I was going to add 5 inches to my round bust measurement. My round bust is 37 plus 5 inches, that's 42 inches. So 42 inches, I'll divide that by 4. And then I have 10.5. So I'll mark that 10.5 on the chest line. And then I'll mark the same measurement at the full length of the top. So because it's a box shirt, that's why I'm using the same measurement at the chest that I'm using at the hem. Next, I'll connect the mark at the bust area to the mark at the full length, and I'll just draw a straight line. For the armhole curve, I'll go to the armhole line I have, and then I'll divide that line by 2, and I'll mark the midpoint. At the midpoint, I'll go in by 1/2 inch and mark that line. Next, I'm going to take my curved ruler and then connect the lines together. So I'm connecting the top line to the midpoint with a slightly slanted line, and then I will connect from the midpoint to the bottom with a more curved line. So you can do this with your free hand if you don't have a curved ruler, but you're connecting the top to the midpoint and then the midpoint to the end of the curve. This is everything for the back pattern, so I'll just cut it out. Now for the front pattern, I'll first mark my 1.5 inch across the paper. So that is going to be my button stand. So it's going to be 1.5 inch bigger than the back pattern. I'll just mark that across and then draw a straight line. All my measurements are going to start from this 1 inch mark. So I'll start with measuring my shoulder measurement, which is 9 inches from the 1 inch mark. Next, I'll mark my neckline. So the width for the front is 2.5 inches, just as the back, but the depth is different. So the depth for the front I'm using is 4 inches. I'll mark that and then use my curved ruler to connect the points to get my neckline. I'll also use a straight line to connect to the 1 inch extension. For me, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing I did for the back piece pattern. The only difference is the armhole. So when I get there, I'll show you the difference. For the front piece, I'll divide the armhole line just as I divided for the back, and then mark it. But instead of going in by 1/2 inch, I will go in by 3/4 inch. So that's the difference between the front and the back piece. So I'm going in by 3/4 inch, and then I'll draw my armhole curve. Next, I'll just make all my necessary annotations and markings, and then I'll cut out the pattern. this is what I have for the front and back pattern. Next, I'm going to draft the sleeve. First, I'm going to measure the armhole curve for the back piece, and that's what I'm going to be using for the width of my sleeve. So I'll just measure around the curve. So I have 9 inches for the armhole curve. So I'll take that 9 inches, add 1 inch to it to give me my sleeve width. So I'll mark that and connect the line together. So next, I'm going to draw my sleeve curve, so where it goes into the armhole. At the top of the sleeve, I'll measure 3 inches from the edge and mark it. Next, I'm going to measure the cap height, which is 5 inches. Then I'll measure 5 inches diagonally and mark it, and then I'd connect those lines together. So the 3 inches and then the 5 inches diagonally and then the 5 inches cap width to get my sleeve curve. Next, I'll measure my sleeve length. So because I'm going to be doing a short sleeve, my sleeve length is 11 inches. So I'll measure it from the top of the sleeve and mark it. Next, I'll apply my round sleeve measurement. So my actual round sleeve is 13 inches divided by 26.5. But because I'm going for a big look, I've added 1.5 inch to that measurement. So I'm marking 8 inches. Then I'll connect that to my sleeve curve. And that's all for the drafting. Starting from the back pattern, I've already placed this fabric on fold. I folded it in two. And then for my allowance, I'm going to leave 2 inches at the bottom, 1 inch at the sides, ½ inch at the armhole, ½ inch at the top, and then I won't leave any allowance. I'll just cut the exact thing for the neckline. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it now. Your allowance can be as much as you want it, but you want to minimize your allowance as much as possible just for neat finishing. But just make sure whatever allowance you are taking or you are adding is what you're going to sew with, so that you have the exact measurements that you initially intended to. I've done the same for the front piece, 2 inches at the bottom, 1 inch at the side, ½ inch at the armhole curve, and no allowance at the neckline. For the sleeve, I made it ½ inch around the sides and 2 inches at the bottom. I'm going to notch the midpoint of the sleeve to prepare for the sewing. Next, I'm going to cut out the yoke for the back of the shirt. So I've just taken a piece of fabric that is big enough to accommodate the yoke, and then I'll place the back of the shirt on it. At the center back, I'll mark 8 inches because I want it to have a rectangular shape. Next, I'll cut out the neckline and then the shoulder and cut all the way to the 6-inch mark I marked at the armhole curve. So basically, I'm replicating what I have on the upper body. Next, I use the ruler to connect my 6-inch mark to the 8-inch mark, and then I'll cut it. I'm going to do all my ironing in preparation for the sewing. I'm going to start by preparing the front, the button stand. So I left 1.5 inches for the button stand. What I want to do is fold this by 1/4 inch in, and then fold it once again by ½ inch. So at the end, I should have like just 3/4 of what I initially took. So I'm using 3/4 to fold it, and then it's going to be remaining 3/4. So I'll just use my pressing iron to iron it onto the wrong side of the fabric. I'll do this for both front pieces. Next, I'll iron the fold for the yoke of the back, and this is what it looks like. So next, I will iron the allowance for the sleeves as well. So I left 2 inches allowance for the sleeves. I'll just fold it for both sleeves. To start sewing, I'll take the sleeve and then go and sew on this point for both sleeves, and then I'll take the front pieces and then sew on where I have ironed as well for both of them at the edge. I've sewn it down and this is what it looks like. Next, I'm going to take the back and the back yoke and place it together. So I'm just going to use a pin to hold it together. I won't be attaching it until I've joined the shoulder together, so I'll just pin it at the midpoint together. Next, I'm going to place the front on it, right side facing right side. Next, I'm going to attach front and back by the shoulder. So I'll be attaching the front to the yoke and then use the back to turn it. So I'll place front and yoke together and then take the back and twist it all the way to the front and then sew it inside. So basically what I'm just trying to do is to get a neat finishing. So I'm attaching front to yoke and then taking the back piece and turning it to the other side and sewing it inside. If you don't understand this, please rewind the video and watch it over again. so you can see clearly what I've just done. So I'll take this to the sewing machine and just sew it across. I'll do this for both shoulders. So I've attached both shoulders together, and can you see it has a neat finishing. Next, I'm going to sew the yoke down. So I'll just take it to the sewing machine and ensure that is folded in, and then I'll just sew around the edge all the way to the other side. I've sewn the yoke. The next thing I'm going to do is to attach the sleeve to the armhole. I'll be sewing from the midpoint of the shoulder all the way to the end, and then I'll come and sew from the midpoint all the way to the other end. I'll do this for both sleeves. So this is what it looks like. I've attached my sleeves together. The next thing I'm going to do is to join the shirt at the sides. This excess I have at the sleeve is not an issue because I'm going to trim it off. So I've joined the sides together. I'm just going to trim off any excess I have left. After I've ironed my seam, the next thing I'm going to do is hem the edge. So I'll just sew it all the way to the end. I've joined the whole shirt together. What's left is the collar. So I'll measure around the neckline. I'll just take my tape following the curve all the way from end to end. I have my measurement as 21 inches. So I'll take that 21 inches and go and draft the collar. First, I'll divide 21 by 2, which is 10.5. I'll mark down the paper and draw a straight line across. Then at that edge, I'll measure 1/2 inch upwards and mark it. Next thing I'm going to do is to split that 10.5 in 2 to find the midpoint of this pattern. So I'll split it and draw a straight line across. So the next thing I'm going to do is to use my curved ruler to mark from that 1/2 inch I went upwards to the midpoint. So I'll just draw a curved line all the way to the midpoint. Next, at that 1/2 inch mark, I'll go up by 1 inch and mark it. Then at the 1 inch line, I'll take a ruler and draw a straight line. This straight line is just a guideline. Next, I'll start sketching out my curve. So this curve is the button stand at the collar. So I'll measure 1 inch in from the start of that curve and mark it. Next, I'll mark the length of the collar. The length of the collar is 4 inches, so I'll mark this across the pattern paper. Next, at the center of the collar, I'll go down by 1/2 inch. I'll use a ruler to connect this to the other edge of the collar. Next, I'll connect the 1 inch I went in at the button stand of the collar all the way to the edge. And this is what my collar looks like. Okay, so I will cut out the pattern and then transfer this to fabric. So I've transferred this to fabric. I just left 1/2 inch allowance all round. So the next thing I'm going to do is I will iron interfacing on one of the collar pieces. So the part I'm ironing interfacing on is the front piece. I've ironed the interfacing on the front piece. The next thing I'm going to do is to use my pressing iron and fold the edge by 1/2 inch. I'll do this for just the front piece. That's the piece that I iron interfacing on. Next, I'm going to take both pieces together and then sew it from this side all the way to the other side. So I've sewn it. Next, I'm going to notch all the sharp corners so that I can easily turn it. Next, I'm going to turn this to the right side and then press it. So this is what it looks like. Next, I'm going to mark the midpoint of this collar so I can attach it to the shirt. So I'll just make a little cut and notch the midpoint. And then I'll do the same for the shirt as well. I'll mark the midpoint. Then I'll place the collar on the shirt. I'll be sewing this from the outside in. So that means the piece of the collar that doesn't have the interface, that's the back piece, is going to be on the outside. So I'm attaching it from the outside of the shirt. When I'm sewing, I'll ensure that my sewing machine is just at the edge of where this should be so that it sits easily when I'm turning it to the right side. So I'll sew from one end to the other. So I'll attach the back piece to the outside, and this is what it looks like. Next, I'm going to sew the front piece. So I'll just sew this with top stitch all the way from end to end. After I've gone end to end, then I'll sew around the edge of the collar. And then I'll sew a straight stitch from the curve all the way to the other side. This is just to give it an illusion of a two-piece collar. So I've gone and done that, and this is what my collar looks like. This video has been helpful. Please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and turn on the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post a new video. So the next thing I'm going to do is to put my markings for my button and buttonhole. So I'm going to mark from the top and then mark 3 inches between until I get to the end. I'll do that for both sides. One side is for the button and one side is for the buttonhole. And this is the final look. Alright then, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.